Hello, everyone. This is another episode of Conversations with Rob, now called Fire Breathing Rob. We are a millennial progressive YouTube channel. We also get noticed on the radio sometimes, so I thank for the people for that. I have a guest on that I've become very fond of, I should say. Watched him on Jimmy Dore quite a few times, so I'm a big fan of Jimmy Dore's. He's a progressive fire breather. He's worked with Bernie Sanders in 2016, the director of community outreach, and he'll talk more about that. And he's trying to start a new party, which I agree with him on, and I know Tulsi Gabbard has talked about this. A couple other big progressives have talked about it. You know, the Democrats have went way too far to the right. We saw that in 2016 and even elections before that. They've run these centrist, moderate candidates that aren't getting the job done for people my age and even senior citizens and people that are middle-aged. I mean, we're still fighting for universal health care. This has been going on since Harry Truman, and it's been going on for every Democratic president since then. Nothing's getting accomplished. It's just mediocre, incremental change. And Nick's going to talk about that. He's trying to start the People's Party, and he will be down in Milwaukee. He's got his own convention down there for the People's Party, and he'll talk more about that. So, Nick, thanks so much for taking time out of your busy schedule in California and coming on the program.
Hey, Rob, it's so great to be with you.
Thanks so much. So let's talk about this, Nick. In 2016, we saw Hillary Clinton started with 500 delegates right off the bat. With the superdelegates. Before even Bernie announced, she had the command already with the establishment. We saw what happened in California the day before the election. They announced the Associated Press that Hillary Clinton was the nominee before people even got to vote in California. And if you go back to 2016, the shenanigans that went on in California with the voting, I believe Bernie won the state of California. Can you talk about all the craziness that went in 2016 that you were on the campaign, that you saw and went through?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I did on the campaign is I lobbied the superdelegates for support for Bernie. And so the party insiders, DNC members, members of Congress, elected officials, and state party chairs and vice chairs. And it was miserable. I mean, they were very much supportive of Hillary Clinton. They didn't care about the issues. And so we see that playing out again, in fact, now in 2020, and nothing has really changed about the party. The party went to great lengths to steal it from Bernie. There was the Hillary Victory Fund, I'm sure you remember, which even Politico and Donna Brazile called money
Elizabeth
laundering.
Warren, too. Elizabeth Warren came out on national TV last year, I think, or the year before that, and said that the election was a cheat job. It was a rigged job. She said it herself.
Even Tom Perez said it briefly when he was running for DNC chair. And so everybody's been able to admit that it was rigged, essentially. Most of those people took it back, by the way, except unfortunately, Bernie has still not admitted it was rigged. He's kind of played around the edges, but yeah, hasn't said it outright.
Nick, you worked on the campaign. I don't know if you had any dealings with Bernie directly. I love Bernie. I'm originally from Rhode Island. We're a New England state, and I love what Bernie stands for. And we saw Bernie back on 2010, 2011, fighting President Obama on the Ed Show on MSNBC. And I've seen Bernie many times on Tom Hartman, even before he ran for president. So I've come to learn and love Bernie. But why is Bernie so weak? Why won't he take off the gloves? And like you said, say it was a rigged job in 2016. I hate President Trump, but I think that it's great that, he's pretty much a jerk, but he takes off the gloves. He went after Jeb Bush and said, hey, these are all your corporate donors that are booing me on the debate stage. Why wouldn't Bernie do that? In South Carolina, we saw on the debate stage, they were booing him consistently. Why didn't Bernie say that? This is all the corporate donors that we're trying to fight in my movement. He just won't take off the gloves. He keeps calling Joe my good friend. He's not our friend. He's fighting against your movement, Bernie. Like, take off the damn gloves. Why won't he do that?
Exactly. I couldn't agree more with you. I think this is a fundamental problem in the campaign and with Bernie's approach, is that Bernie is trying to play both sides this time. And I think it's one of the reasons actually that the campaign is now in the situation that it's in. You know, the campaign, it was doing very well, of course, about a week ago. And then you've seen that, you know, Biden did super well in South Carolina, and you've seen a flood of endorsements of former candidates to Biden. And now Bernie's in trouble. And part of it is because he's, you know, while he's been the most progressive candidate in the race, you know, along with Tulsi, he's been reluctant to go all in. He's been reluctant to say the establishment, the Democratic establishment, is corrupt. Obama, when he was asked, you know, is Obama part of the establishment? Of course Obama's a part of the establishment. You know, so you can't have it both ways. You can't be running against the establishment and also not be saying things like this. He has to make up his mind. And in fact, in 2016, you know, the greatest part of the appeal of the campaign was the fact that he was running solidly against the Democratic and Republican establishment. And he was using the term, the oligarchy. And he's kind of backed away since 2016 from a lot of that language. And he's taken the edge off a little bit of the messaging against the two parties, particularly against the Democrats, you know? And so it's kind of like, on the one hand, he wants to run this really anti-establishment campaign, but he also wants to maintain these connections to the party insiders. And I think it's creating this kind of schizophrenia and inconsistency in the messaging of the campaign. And he just needs to go all out. I mean, that's what was successful in 2016, all out against the establishment. It's what was successful for Trump, too. You know, people don't want something in the middle. They want solidly anti-establishment.
What do you think the Sanders campaign can do? I mean, they have some favorable states coming up. Michigan's coming up. My state in Florida, I think he's in deep trouble. I mean, he did pretty bad in Florida last time. He only got like 700 some odd thousand votes, and Hillary got over 1 million. So I think it's going to be tough down here in Florida. What do you think the Sanders campaign can do in these favorable states? But then Joe Biden, like you said, I think if Bernie goes one-on-one with Joe Biden in a debate, he will be extremely successful because he's a good debater. He's gotten a lot better than he did when he started in 2016. And you see Joe Biden, and I listen to Jordan Sheridan, I listen to Jimmy Dore, all these guys in independent media, the Real News too, are very good. We see Joe Biden fumbling and stumbling on his words. He's saying Super Thursday. He's saying, he doesn't know this president's name.
His wife and his sister.
Yeah, his wife and his sister. Yes, in the Super Tuesday speech, he didn't know between his wife and his sister. How about when he said President Obama? He couldn't say his name. He said my boss. He doesn't even know who he worked for. So I mean, these are things, and the mainstream media isn't saying these things. Bernie, and he doesn't have the cojones to say this. But if he came out and said this, it says Joe Biden doesn't know where the hell he's at, and he won't do it.
You know what? I kind of understand Bernie not saying that directly, but I do think that the campaign and others in the progressive movement should engage in a campaign to reveal that this whole deterioration. You know, I mean, I'm surprised I haven't seen it, frankly, but somebody should create montages of all of his different gaffes just to make this click for people. You know, because I feel like Biden's being trotted around almost half willingly. Like he is deteriorating in real time. Like he's worse off than he was when the campaign began, you know? And so it's kind of sad to a degree. It's kind of sad because the people around him seem to be using him to try to get, you know, the nomination, keep Bernie from getting it. But it's someone who doesn't even seem to have like the mental faculties anymore to be able to hold that job, like, let alone to be campaigning for it.
Right. A couple more questions about Bernie, and then I want to go into what you're doing. Why don't, we saw before Super Tuesday, what the talk is, Barack Obama called Pete Buttigieg and also Amy Klobuchar, Beto O'Rourke, and they all formed that coalition to screw Bernie. Why didn't Bernie, the campaign, call up Tulsi Gabbard, really push Elizabeth Warren to drop out of the race and endorse Bernie? Why don't you think they did that? Why didn't they, we saw the coalition, but we didn't see it on the Sanders side. Why don't you think that happened?
Right. I mean, I think it would be a good idea if Bernie offered, for example, Tulsi a position in his administration. Certainly think she'd be qualified for that,
Yeah.
you know, and if the price is also of getting Warren's support, offering her, you know, a position as vice president, then, you know, so be it. You know, I think he should do that as well. I'm
But
not sure why he's necessarily kind of has not reached out to them, or it seemed like they did talk, you know. So
yeah.
but my view is that I, having been on the campaign in 2016, Warren was doing, you know, she didn't step into the race until the very end and you know, and make an official endorsement. But before that, she was still doing things to make it clear that she kind of supported Hillary as opposed to Bernie. And so I don't trust Warren. I think her loyalties ultimately lie with the establishment. And I think what she's doing right now is she's using Bernie and the press around her endorsement decision just to get leverage for a better deal with Biden, frankly.
You think so? I don't know how else did they get this campaign back in check. I mean, he was at front runner status and after Nevada. I mean, they didn't use any of that leverage. He should have been going out all the time saying, I'm the most electable. I'm an FDR Democrat. These things are not radical. These things are, and I know he does say this, these things are happening all over the world, but I just want FDR's vision. He went out on a speech, I think it was in George Mason or George Washington, about democratic socialism, talked about FDR. And he never really has done that since. So that's
Yeah.
why I think he needs to do more about that. Use that FDR approach to get back in the mainframe. What do you think about that speech? I'm sure you remember that, and that was a great speech.
I do, and I was very excited about it. I like it when Bernie leans into, you know, socialism and discussing what it is. I saw him give a town hall recently. It was right after Nevada, I believe, on CNN. And he's developed the perfect answer to the socialism attack. And that is, you know, we already have socialism in this country. It's just corporate socialism. You know, when taxpayers pay food stamps for Walmart workers, that's socialism for Walmart, for the Walton family. You know, when a GE pays nothing, you know, in taxes, that's socialism and infrastructure costs and education, you know, for GE, and so on.
So let me ask you this, a last question on Bernie. Who do you think the right vice presidential pick rather would be for Bernie to get kind of maybe juice? Should he do something like Ted Cruz did in 2016 where he would, you know, it didn't work, but Ted Cruz was down against Trump. He said, I'm going to run with Carly Fiorina. Do you think that's the thing to do right now to maybe get some juice for the campaign, get the media narrative in a different way from Biden winning all these races?
Well, yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I think that's one of the things that Bernie could actually do to recapture the narrative. You know, so Bernie was riding high, like you said, a week ago after a crushing win in Nevada, you know, but the momentum and the narrative and the tempo has all changed, unfortunately, even though the delegate math is about even, you know, right now. And so that's the problem. So right now, I think the campaign's primary focus and Bernie's primary focus needs to be changing that narrative. And so they need to introduce something new, you know, a new factor, whether it's, for example, after Bernie got destroyed in South Carolina in 2016, Tulsi came out. And that, you know, that reframed the narrative. Is like, all right, there's a new factor in there. It isn't necessarily predictable. All the momentum isn't on Biden's side. You know, it wasn't on Hillary's side. We need something like that again, I feel. So he needs to, whether it's big endorsements, President Jimmy Carter, for example, who actually did vote in 2016. I don't know if the campaign is doing this, but they should be. You know, I was a part of reaching out to Vice President Carter. I mean, to the former President Carter for his support, and I think we would have gotten it early on if we had asked earlier in the campaign, actually. But that's the kind of thing that I think he needs to do. Another thing is kind of along the lines of what you mentioned. He could do is he could put out a list, you know, either himself or he could leak it to the media of different presidential candidates that he's considering. You know, and one of them could be Warren. I'm partial to Nina Turner. I think she would make a fantastic vice president. But though, you know, these are the kinds of things that, like, he needs some big stories right now that remind people that that he's even and that he's a big competitor, and shake up that narrative basically.
This is leading into your movement right now. We saw in 2016 there were people that were chanting in the streets. They were protesting in the streets from the rig job that happened in 2016. If they rig it from Bernie again, I mean, right now Biden's on a high, but everything could change. As you said, the delegate math is just about the same within maybe 20, 30, 40 delegates. And who knows, after California is fully counted, how close it will really be. It could even be closer than it is now. So if we see this rig job again, if Obama comes out and pushes Biden even harder than he has already behind the scenes, if people like Hillary Clinton do even worse than they've done now, and Biden gets that when it's really close, maybe 20 votes either way, and that goes to Biden, my question is to you, are we going to see the same protesting in the streets, but it may even be worse this time? And a Joe Biden going against Donald Trump, not only will Donald Trump destroy him in the debates, but also Donald Trump will win this election in a landslide never be foreseen in recent history. This could go back to Mondale, to George McGuffin with the Joe Biden on the ticket. Do you agree with that?
I think Trump will crush Biden. And I think that Trump will, I think he would have crushed Biden even before Biden's mental deterioration. But frankly, with that deterioration, I think he'll be savage. Trump is exceptionally well at zeroing in on one aspect of a person and, framing that as the center of the debate, and making the whole thing circle around that. And so I don't think, no, I don't think that, it's crazy, the Democratic thinking that people voted, when they voted for Trump, that was the biggest vote against the Obama administration and the Obama administration's legacy, that you could possibly imagine. The biggest repudiation of it. Because if people were happy with it, why wouldn't they stick with the Democrats? Sure. They weren't happy with it. And so in their infinite wisdom, the Democratic establishment is literally putting up the vice president in that administration. Yeah. Someone who's even more conservative. Obama added Biden to the ticket to signal to Wall Street in 2008 that he was in fact one of them.
Well, we've ran the same moderates. Al Gore, John Kerry, Barack Obama won because he ran as a progressive twice. In the same thing, Hillary Clinton, another moderate. Now they're going to run another moderate and screw the progressive again. It's just right. The same circle in a different order. It's just it gets me aggravated, but.
And in the bigger picture, it's there's been, ever since the 70s, there's been the whole political spectrum, both parties have shifted to the right continuously. And the way that pattern has worked is that, a Republican has been elected, like Reagan, for example, and he's swung the country, just wildly lurched to the right, lowering taxes, particularly for corporations, writing up corporate trade deals, just dismantling Social Security and the social safety net. And then what happens is that a Democrat comes in, like Clinton, like Obama. And instead of undoing that, and instead of taking us back, to the left and restoring those things, they normalize everything that the Republican did. Like Clinton normalizing NAFTA, he was ultimately the one to pass it, continuing to dismantle the crime bill, like you said, basically repealing the New Deal and all the financial regulations, that were created then. And then the same story with Obama. And so that's the pattern, is that it's like, I've heard it called like the ratchet effect, that every time, we go more and more to the right. And Biden would just be the next step in that ratchet effect. Rather than undoing the things that Trump has done, he would make them the new norm.
Well, George Bush is a new hero in the country now. He didn't do anything wrong except kill millions of Americans and people overseas in the Middle East, Iraqis and Afghani kids. But yeah, no, he's great now. He's hugging and kissing with Michelle Obama. He's a new man now. But anyways, What I think is going to happen again, and I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, if this is why your movement got started for a People's Party, is because of the same game is happening in the Democratic Party. It's the same party as the Republican Party, just a little bit to the left of the Republican Party. Hillary Clinton was a Goldwater Democrat. Joe Biden has fought for Republican policies his whole life. So, I mean, it's just the same old, same old. Barack Obama said that his policies are just Reagan light. He said that, went on TV and said that. But is that why you started a People's Party? Because, Hillary Clinton was running, and they not only did she screw Bernie, but it's just the Democrats have moved to the right.
So myself and other Bernie staffers and delegates and super volunteers in 2017, we started the movement for a People's Party because we did a couple of things. First, we looked at what people wanted here in the United States, and there's a good body of opinion polling about this. And it shows that, for example, Gallup has tracked how many people want an independent party, year after year for like a couple decades. Yeah. And it shows that there's been this explosion of people who want a major new party. It's now almost 2 out of 3 Americans. And it's been going up sharply, especially in the last 15 years and the last 5 years. And then the same thing has happened with independents. The number of independents in the US, millions of people have been disaffiliating from the Democratic and the Republican parties together. And they're becoming independents. And now the number of independents is almost as much as Republicans and Democrats combined. And so it's almost half of the electorate. And so, as you play these trends forward, and as you combine them with the fact that people are paying more for their health care, they're paying more for their college student debt, they're paying more in cost of living, for housing, you get a situation that is clearly unsustainable. It's going to break somewhere. And so the question is, if the Democratic Party isn't going to change, then where is that break going to happen? And that's where what happened is that we looked abroad also. So it's like, how are progressive movements in other countries succeeding? And we found really interestingly that where progressive movements are trying to reform their center-left parties, they're failing, and it's not working. But where they are creating new parties, like in Mexico and in Chile and in Spain and in Germany and in Italy and in Greece, in those countries, it's actually succeeding. In those countries, those parties are breaking through, actually. And these are new, digitally savvy parties, and they have much greater appeal, and so there's a definite trend that has emerged there. The kind of party system internationally has broken down, and we want to bring that here to the United States. It's very clear that that's a successful kind of model.
Yeah, I agree with you, Nick. But the question is, and I'm sure you see this every day, is how do you get it done? When we do have a vast movement of people that do want that third party, but, you look at the Greens and they can't get over 5%. I feel like the only way to get a new party such as yours or the Greens or whatever it may be to, really make a dent in this country is if we have a really good candidate to put up. And the candidate I felt that could have really done this is a person that's an independent already, is Bernie Sanders, to run as an independent and then, go against Joe Biden and Donald Trump. We saw this before with Ross Perot. We saw this with Ralph Nader. But this guy will not do this. He, we just went through this, so I'm not going to go about, he calls everybody his friend. He's going to vote for the Democrat no matter who gets it. We just went through that, but he should just say, as Trump said, Trump, they asked him, who's going to, raise your hand if you're going to support the nominee. Trump didn't raise his hand. And, he had them. Bernie's got the people behind him. He doesn't owe anything to the Democratic Party. If he ran in your party or another party, he would be fine. He would get the votes. He probably would win. But it's just upsetting. I'm sorry. I know I went on a tangent. It's really upsetting.
It's Bernie's missed a big opportunity. I think there's no doubt about that. He's missed a big opportunity in 2020. He missed a big opportunity when we initially invited him to start a new party in 2017, and more than 50,000 people petitioned him to do it, just to have the conversation. But what we're planning now is the Movement for a People's Party is aiming to get that started. And so we are planning to hold a Milwaukee People's Convention in Milwaukee. And we want to hold that at the same time as the DNC Democratic Convention, just a few blocks away, hopefully. And so the idea is that, if Bernie gets the majority, or even if he doesn't, get the plurality, it'll be regardless, the party will try to screw him out of it, and if he doesn't get the plurality, it'll obviously be because they've screwed him out of it in so many other ways before that. But if he gets it, they're going to activate the super delegates. They're going to take it to a second ballot. They're going to try to get the corporate candidates to consolidate their delegates around Biden, and they're going to try to take it from him. And so, what we've figured that we need is we need a couple of things. Like, first of all, there need to be thousands of people in the streets of Milwaukee protesting that. But then that's not enough, What we also need is we need a place where we can rally as Bernie delegates, as working people, as progressives who are all there in the city, and we can say, this hasn't worked, let's start something new and let's have a vote. And that's what we're planning on doing, getting hundreds, hopefully maybe even thousands of people together next door and saying, this is the end. We're starting, a major new party. Invite some of the Bernie surrogates, invite whoever's in town, have them come speak, have them come join us, and let's get this started, because this has now been 3 times, 2016, 2018, and 2020, that we have, that progressives have been cheated out of something. And there's only so long that we can continue to deny what people are clearly telling us. Almost 2 out of 3 saying we need a major new party, millions disaffiliating with the 2 parties. Like, come on, it's time to take our cues from the people rather than to assume that we know what's best.
Nick, do you feel like the only way to get a real People's Party, as you said, be in the streets, get the people motivated and energized? But we really do need a yellow vest movement in this country. You agree with that, to get a new party like this? Because that's the only way the corporations are going to really pay attention. I mean, you looked at the movement as Bernie started. You've got so many young people and new people involved, a lot of Hispanic people, Asian, Native American people, young Black people involved, and they still don't get it. So I feel like a yellow vest movement may be the thing that triggers change, such as they've done in France. Do you agree with that?
People need to get out in the street, and they need to start protesting, for what they want. And there is an increase in, I think, people coming to that realization, both among Bernie's supporters and among other groups as well. For example, Extinction Rebellion does a ton, is their theory of change is about getting in the streets. And so I do think it's very important. I do think it's very important that we bring thousands of people into the streets of Washington, D.C., and we build up to that kind of thing. And we do the same thing in Milwaukee, because, as we've seen it in Chile and Lebanon and other countries. It's going to be part of how the change happens, I think.
All right. Nick Brana here from People's Party. 2 more questions for you. Can you talk about the platform for the People's Party? Where did you come up with it? Is it more similar to Bernie's message, or is it just kind of a little bit of him, a little bit of kind of what you've thought of and the people around you? What is the platform?
It's very much inspired by Bernie's 2016 platform. And also it was produced by hundreds of MPP supporters who over about a month and a half we discussed it and had a process of deliberation and drafting where we arrived at it, and this was a couple of years ago.
Okay. Bernie, if he does win the nomination, beat Trump?
He runs as basically the anti-billionaire, which he's already so well positioned to do. The conditions that working people have experienced during 4 years of Trump has not been what Trump promised, you know? And so he has to run against that record. He has to run against the fact that Trump, the minute he got into office, put more billionaires in his administration than anyone. And so I think he has the ability to do this, you know? And I think that there was a recording, you might have seen it actually, where Trump off the record said, you know, when he thought he wasn't being taped or on the record, he said that the one person that he was afraid of running against was Bernie in 2016. And that's because he understood that Bernie is anti-establishment too. And that's what people are looking for. And so he said, I got about 20% of the Bernie voters, you know, when they shut him down. And so I feel like that, you know, and kind of like one of the biggest ironies here, you alluded to it, is that the moderates and the Joe Biden voters, if Bernie was picked, they will come out. But the young people and, you know, progressives, if it was a moderate, they won't come out.
No.
You know?
Nick Brana from the People's Party, thanks so much for coming on Fire Breathing Rob. Look at the bottom of our screen. We do have a subscribe button. Please subscribe. We have amazing people from amazing organizations talking about trying to make real changes in this country and in the world. So Nick, thanks so much for coming on. I definitely would love to have you back on before Milwaukee to talk about what's going on, and even in Milwaukee, you know, talk about the fight against the Democratic Party and for a People's Party.
Hey, Rob, count me in anytime.
All right. Thanks so much, Nick.
Great talking to you.